Hello and welcome to our afternoon edition of Arirang News, coming to you from Seoul. I'm Kwon Jang-won and it's good to have you with us. Could a second North Korea-US summit be on the way? The White House has certainly raised the possibility again after it confirmed that President Trump had received a letter from Kim Jong-un, who is said to have requested another meeting. We'll look at that in more detail later on the show, but first let's go over to our news centre with Devin Whiting, who has the latest headlines for us. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. It is looking increasingly like a second North Korea-US summit is in the works. In fact, South Korean President Moon Jae-in is calling for just that. He says bold decisions are needed from Pyongyang and Washington to achieve denuclearization. Shin Se-min reports.
Less than a week left before President Moon Jae-in heads to Pyongyang for his third encounter with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Chairing his weekly meeting with the cabinet, President Moon said the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. need to hold a second summit themselves and asked both parties to make bold decisions.
이제 북한이 보유 중인 핵을 폐기하는 한 차원 더 높은 단계로 나아가려면 다시 한번 북미 양 정상 간의 통큰 구상과 대담한 결단이 필요합니다. 한반도의 완전한 비핵화는 기본적으로 북미 간의 협상으로 해결되어야 할 문제입니다.
And the president said he will continue to act as a mediator between the two, a role he said both Kim Jong-un and President Trump had asked him to play. His comments come just days before he sits down with the North Korean leader for a third time just this year in the regime's capital, a meeting President Moon said must lead to another big step towards a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. He added that Pyongyang needs to follow through on dismantling its nuclear facilities, and Washington needs to take corresponding steps. And as that happens, he said the two sides will put aside the deep-rooted distrust between them that started 70 years ago. Meanwhile, the administration has finalized a bill it plans to submit to the National Assembly that would ratify the inter-Korean agreement reached back in April. And the president's senior secretary for political affairs, Han Byung-do, visited the legislature to once again invite top lawmakers to accompany the president to North Korea next week, a proposal the rival political parties remain sharply divided on. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
President Trump's new envoy for North Korea issues arrived in South Korea on Monday, and he spent the whole of Tuesday paying visits to senior South Korean officials, including the foreign minister, Kang Kyung-hwa, and his own counterpart. Lee Ji-won has more.
What South Korea and the U.S. have to do now is to finish the job. This is what U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun said earlier when he had his first official sit-down with his South Korean counterpart Lee Do-hoon. Biegun arrived in Seoul on Monday and made his first diplomatic visit to the Foreign Ministry on Tuesday. Seoul Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs Lee Do-hoon briefed Biegun on the latest developments on the Korean Peninsula, including the results of the Special Envoy's trip to Pyongyang last week. They also exchanged views on the current situation and had an in-depth discussion about the strategies needed to achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula and to achieve a stable peace in the region. Though Biegun said there is much work to be done, he seemed determined to move ahead.
As we have spoken with, we take very seriously the responsibilities that are on both of us. We have some hard work to do, but we also have a tremendous opportunity created by President Trump, by President Moon, and by Chairman Kim. And we need to do everything we can to take the most of this moment of opportunity. I've heard that there's a Korean proverb that the beginning is half done. Okay. And this is the beginning. So what we need to do is finish the job.
Prior to meeting his counterpart, Biegun also paid a visit to Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, with whom he reaffirmed this whole Washington alliance, especially with major diplomatic events coming up, including the Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang and the UN General Assembly. Biegun will conclude his three-day trip on Wednesday and fly to China and Japan. But he is expected back in Seoul sometime this week to share the results of his talks in Beijing and Tokyo. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
South Korea's national security advisor spoke on the phone Monday with his Russian counterpart to brief him on the outcome of his recent trip to the north. The Blue House confirmed that call between Chung Eui-yong and Nikolai Patrushev, the secretary of the Security Council of Russia, lasted for 35 minutes. The two exchanged views on issues related to the Korean Peninsula and ways to develop bilateral relations between Seoul and Moscow. They also agreed to communicate and cooperate closely to move forward with denuclearization and to establish lasting peace in the region. The Blue House also confirmed that Chung spoke with U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton Monday evening, Korea time. They pledged to work together in light of the upcoming inter-Korean summit. Seoul and Pyongyang will be holding another round of military talks at the border village of Panmunjom on Thursday. South Korea's defense ministry announced the talks this morning, saying that the North first suggested the meeting. These talks at the working level will take place at the Tongilgak building on the North Korean side of Panmunjom. Following up on the progress from the talks between military generals in July, the two sides are expected to discuss the joint excavation of war remains in the demilitarized zone and the withdrawal of guard posts from the DMZ, among other issues. Turning to the economy, new data show Korea's manufacturing sector is still stuck in a slump. Manufacturing has long been the backbone of the local economy, so there are fears that if the slowdown continues, it could cause a recession. That's compounded by the fact that companies in the sector are struggling to pay their debts. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
A slowdown in South Korea's manufacturing sector, namely its traditionally strong shipbuilding and auto sectors, suggests the local economy may be heading toward a recession. Data released by the OECD on Monday shows the composite leading indicator for the country recorded 99.2 for July, 0.2 point lower than the previous month. A reading below 100 means an economy is in a downtrend, and it signifies that economic growth in South Korea is slower compared to other OECD member countries. The indicator has been falling for 16 months in a row now after hitting a peak of 100.98 in March 2017. The indicator is used by the OECD to predict a country's economic conditions 6 to 9 months down the line, and is based on various data from the Bank of Korea and Statistics Korea on the inventory cycles of the nation's manufacturing sectors, as well as business sentiment among manufacturers. Separate data from Korea's Financial Supervisory Service released on Tuesday shows a sharp monthly increase in the amount of overdue debt owed by small and mid-sized companies, meaning their ability to repay loans fell. The financial watchdog says late loan payments mainly came from subcontractors of large conglomerates in the auto and shipbuilding sectors that endured restructuring. It says their overdue interest rates rose by 0.1 percentage points from a month earlier to around 0.6% in late July. Overdue interest rates overall, including those of conglomerates and households, maintained their previous level, edging up by less than 0.05% in July. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The White House has confirmed that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has sent US President Donald Trump another letter in which Kim says he wants to meet with Trump again to discuss the ongoing denuclearization efforts. This comes after Trump cancelled his Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's trip to Pyongyang last month, citing insufficient progress on the North's denuclearization. But the letter and the fact that North Korea withheld showcasing its ICBMs at its recent military parade seems to have put talks back on a positive track. Lee Seung-jae has more details on the White House announcement.
Very warm and very positive. These are the words White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders used on Monday to describe the letter President Trump received from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, calling for a second meeting between the two leaders.
Yeah, the president has received the letter from Kim Jong-un. It was a very warm, very positive letter. We won't release the full letter unless the North Korean leader agrees that we should. The primary purpose of the letter was to request and look to schedule another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process of coordinating that.
Just last week, President Trump revealed he was expecting a letter from the North Korean leader amid stalled negotiations to dismantle the regime's nuclear weapons program. Asked whether a potential second summit could take place in Washington, the White House said the U.S. would be keen on hosting it on home ground.
We'll let you know when we have further details, but certainly something that we want to take place, and we'll already continue to work on making that happen.
President Trump and Kim held their first summit in Singapore in June. At the time, North Korea committed to work toward the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in exchange for security guarantees from the U.S. However, negotiations to implement the deal have appeared to hit an impasse as Washington demanded a full inventory of Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal, while the regime insisted on first declaring a formal end to the Korean War. With another inter-Korean summit kicking off in the North Korean capital in exactly a week, the latest development has many asking whether there will be a second North Korea-US summit soon after. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
For more, we have with us Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies to help us unpack what's the latest developments. It's great to have you with us again.
Pleased to be here again.
The White House has announced, as we saw in that report, that President Donald Trump has received a letter from Kim Jong-un, requesting another summit meeting. So perhaps a second North Korea-US summit in the works. It's quite a turnaround from a few weeks ago when Mike Pompeo's trip was cancelled, with President Trump citing, saying that there wasn't sufficient progress on the North Korea's denuclearization. There seems to be quite a turnaround. What do you think? Do you think the reason is because of the letter and because of the parade that was shown recently?
Well, before the no display of the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, on a parade on the National Foundation Day, which was the 9th of September, and the personal letter, which the White House called a very warm, very positive letter to U.S. President Donald Trump, with a request for another summit meeting. There was a special envoy sent by the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea to Pyongyang and had a meeting with the chairman of the Korean Workers' Party, Kim Jong-un. I think it is not just the type of the parade that North Korean leadership displayed or the supply of the warm personal letter to the White House, but there must be something very concrete promised by the top leadership of North Korea when North Korea received a special envoy from South Korea with regards to what kind of specific and verifiable steps toward the complete denuclearization of North Korea would be made. Without that guarantee, I suspect that Trump administration would not be able to move so fast toward another summit meeting with North Korea. So before the subdued military parade on the 9th, before the supply of the personal letter, there was a kind of guarantee made by the top leadership of North Korea, something that United States certainly welcome as a new development.
If we go with what the White House spokesperson Sarah Huckabee Sanders revealed, she said that it was Kim Jong-un in the letter who was the one who requested and took the initiative to invite Trump for a second summit meeting. It seems to me that it's always the North Korean side who's asking Trump for a request for a meeting, and Trump is always the one who pulls back, and it's North Korea always the one who pulls him back. Would you agree with that assessment, and what's that say about the North Korean position at this current time?
You're absolutely correct that North Korea and the United States are in a negotiation platform that is totally opposite to the previous platforms of negotiation in the early part of the North Korean nuclear crisis, in which the United States is in a favorable position because of its ability to actually pull out of the agreement or its capability to walk away from the negotiation table. North Korea used to enjoy that advantage in the previous rounds of negotiation with the United States. But now, under the Trump administration, now the United States is enjoying that strategic advantage or leverage on North Korea. And to Kim Jong-un in North Korea, US President Donald Trump is the best hope for making a breakthrough without making the complete denuclearization of North Korea as a unilateral decisions, which many inside the North Korean government would consider as unconditional surrender to the United States, which is still the main adversary since the suspension of the Korean War. That is one of the reasons why North Korean leadership is so preoccupied with getting the declaration, official declaration by the Trump administration about the end of the Korean War and the termination of hostile policy toward North Korea. Without that clear sign expressed by the United States, then Kim Jong-un government cannot really justify to the general public and the armed forces that it is okay to lay down the arms, including the nuclear warheads and intercontinental ballistic missiles. That does not constitute a surrender to the United States, but it's a strategic decision and a safe decision for us to move from nuclear and missile development to economic development. But at the same time, Donald Trump, who does not really see eye to eye with his step members, who still harbor a great deal of distrust toward North Korea because of their previous experience dealing with North Koreans, can be North Korea's worst nightmare if things go awry. I mean, imagine that President Trump, with deep disappointment for whatever reasons, go back to the days in which he threatened the annihilation of North Korea completely at the United Nations, and he used the term that fire and fury. So North Korean leadership has to keep President Trump very close, but at the same time, it has to guard itself from the possibility that Trump can be the biggest threat to North Korea once things go in a wrong way.
Despite what North Korea wants, as you mentioned, their trust is the main issue. Many critics would argue that you can't really trust North Korea, and they would say that this letter and the recent developments with the toned-down parade doesn't actually point to much. In fact, there's a recent report, which was reported on NBC, that said North Korea is continuing to develop its nuclear weapons. And there's another report by VOA which said that the missile site that they said that they were dismantling hasn't had any progress in the last month or so. If it turns out, how seriously should we take this then from the North Korean side? Can we trust them or can we not trust them?
Well, it depends on how liberal are you in accepting North Korea's own explanations that those actions must be welcomed as a concrete steps toward complete denuclearization. But many critics in the United States and South Korea would say that North Korea only eliminate the facilities and capability that are not essential to its maintenance of nuclear capability to threaten South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So what I would expect is that there must have been an additional guarantee by the top leadership of North Korea that additional steps with regards to verifiable and meaningful denuclearization must have been promised during the meetings with the special envoy from Moon Jae-in government of South Korea. What kind of the additional steps that could be considered satisfactory to the United States, that the United States would agree to prepare for another summit meeting with Kim Jong-un? I would say that some kind of meaningful disablement of nuclear facility in Yongbyon based upon the reprocessing of plutonium or the suspension or termination of programs to enrich uranium. That means that North Korea's capability to quickly increase its nuclear warheads or weapon-graded materials will be virtually terminated. So not only North Korea can say to the United States and the world that, listen, we destroyed the missile test site in Punggye-ri, and the satellite test site in Dongchangri. So we eliminate our capability to make things worse, going back to the series of provocation in 2017. In addition to those steps, that we will take another steps of disabling the existing nuclear facilities, so that our capability to increase our weapon capability will be stopped. Then the last task lying between Pyongyang and Washington, D.C. would eliminating the past nuclear capability and materials North Korea has already produced and maintained. That will be the last phase of the denucleation process.
Do you still think these latest developments does point towards a positive step, perhaps towards another US-North Korea summit? Do you think it can happen before the end of the year?
Well, by the end of the year, we have to wait and see the outcome of the two summit meetings. The first one is between Kim and Moon on 18th to 20th this month. And you must welcome that. The dates are set, right? But you have another homework to do, which is another summit meeting between US and DPRK. We will make you very busy. So it depends on what kind of concrete outcomes will be produced from those two meetings. Then it is not impossible for us to witness the very meaningful progress with regards to denucleation of the entire Korean Peninsula. And President Moon Jae-in of South Korea himself just announced today that that's the new goal. That's the new goal, keeping the Korean Peninsula free of nuclear weapons. So we have to see.
Let's look at those comments from Moon Jae-in a bit further today. So he said pretty much that both the US and North Korea have asked him to become the mediator between them. And that's a lot of pressure on him. But, but today he also put the ball back in the US and North Korea's court, saying that it's actually up to them, up to those two, to make bold decisions to move towards denuclearization and towards the peace agreements and things like that. That's the only way forward. But still, how important is next week's Inter-Korean summit? Because he is acting as a mediator for now. So what can he do there? What should we expect from it?
I'm cautiously optimistic that the upcoming summit meeting between Mr. Kim Jong-un and Mr. Moon Jae-in is already set to be very successful, without the guarantee of a very successful outcomes produced by the two leaders. The summit meeting must have been postponed sometime after the General Assembly meeting of the United Nations. So I would say that there will be important developments announced by the both leaders out of the summit meeting. And based upon the successful outcomes of the Inter-Korean summit meeting, the upcoming summit meeting between US President Trump and the Chairman Kim Jong-un of North Korea will be paved the way. So in that regard, that many people could be really frustrated by the lack of pace or speed with regard to North Korea's denuclearization and the establishment of the peace regime on the Korean Peninsula, including the official declaration of the end of the Korean War. But in terms of keeping the things moving in the right direction, we have made tremendous progress since the beginning of the year 2018. And things are moving in the right direction, and the momentum is still alive. So we have a lot of reasons to remain optimistic and positive. One example is that we have not worried about the cloud of the military conflict on the Korean Peninsula since day one of 2018, and North Korea has not conducted any provocations or either nuclear or missile tests for the past 9 months. So I could indicate a lot of positive signs, and there is still a very strong consensus between North Korea and other related parties to keep the momentum in the same direction.
How delicate do you think this situation still is, though? I mean, North Korea has shown that they really want to try and continue talks with the US. Does that mean at the moment, for now, it seems quite stable, as in like there's the threat of conflict, as you talked about just now, has really dissipated for now at least?
Well, I mean, you have to take into account that North Korea and the United States are talking to each other, right? There have been two major cancellations of the important developments, the summit meeting between Trump and Kim, and a scheduled visit by Secretary Mike Pompeo to Pyongyang. But in both cases, the momentum was resuscitated by the initiative taken by South Korea, or some additional actions taken by North Korea itself. So I don't think there is any danger of derailment of the current momentum in favor of keeping the bilateral and multilateral negotiations with North Korea. So you just questioned that whether it is conceivable for us to actually have the official declaration of the Korean War and North Korea's denuclearization by the end of this year. Well, it depends on what kind of criterion you're going to apply to those two decisions. But nothing is impossible if both leaders of the United States and North Korea would make bold decisions, as South Korean President Moon Jae-in urged them to.
Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you for coming in, and it's always great to get your thoughts on the matters on North Korea as well.
Thank you.
That's where we'll end it. I'll be back same time tomorrow for more in-depth look at the day's top stories, so I hope you can join us then. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.